Alright, so let's talk about one of the closest calls George Washington had in the Revolutionary War, the Battle of White Plains. Picture it. It's October 28, 1776, and the British Army, fresh off a string of victories, is zeroing in on Washington's forces in White Plains, New York. They're moving in fast and hard, trying to end this rebellion once and for all. To understand why White Plains became a battleground, let's take a look at what's been going down in 1776. The British had just landed in New York with a force that dwarfed anything Washington could muster. After devastating the Continental Army at the Battle of Long Island, the British were pushing north, basically steamrolling through American defenses with ease. Washington's troops were battered, exhausted, and outgunned, but they couldn't afford to give up New York without a fight. As Washington moved his troops up the Hudson, he hoped to regroup, find higher ground, and just maybe, outmaneuver the British forces under General Howe. Washington decided to set up a defensive position at White Plains, hoping the terrain would give him an edge against the advancing redcoats. But the British weren't about to let him slip away. Howe knew that a quick, decisive victory at White Plains could end the rebellion. With that in mind, he set his sights on White Plains and prepared to deliver a crushing blow. Alright, buckle up, because October 28, 1776 is about to go down in history. Washington's got his troops spread across the hills surrounding White Plains, trying to use the high ground as a defensive advantage, but even though he's got the terrain, he's got a major problem. His forces are low on supplies and the British forces are well armed, fresh and ready to pounce. General Howe, spotting a potential weak point on Chatterton Hill, orders his forces to attack. The fighting is fierce, chaotic, and brutal. Washington's men put up a brave fight, but the British have artillery, disciplined soldiers, and cavalry to push the Americans back. The Continental Army gives everything they've got, but eventually, the Redcoats capture Chatterton Hill, forcing Washington to pull back and regroup. This battle could have been a disaster for the Continental Army, but Washington had a trick up his sleeve: strategic retreat. While Howe was focusing on taking Chatterton Hill, Washington quietly started pulling his troops back under the cover of darkness, repositioning them to avoid a full-scale collapse. It was a gutsy move, but it worked. Washington's retreat meant that even though he lost the high ground, he kept his forces intact. In the days after the battle, Howe failed to press his advantage, and Washington managed to slip away, taking his army with him. Instead of an all-out rout, Washington's quick thinking kept the American cause alive. In many ways, his decision to retreat showed that winning the war wasn't just about winning battles. It was about outlasting the British, finding ways to keep his army together, and seizing victory whenever the opportunity arose. So what did the Battle of White Plains mean for the war overall? First, it taught Washington a crucial lesson about British tactics and just how far they'd go to secure control of New York. Second, it showcased his ability to adapt, survive, and think on his feet even when the odds were stacked against him. White Plains marked a shift in Washington's approach to the war. He realized that this wasn't going to be a series of head-on clashes with the British. Instead, it was going to be a war of endurance and strategy. White Plains also underscored the importance of morale. Even though the Americans didn't win the battle in traditional terms, Washington's retreat allowed his troops to regroup and fight another day, which was a psychological win of its own. The Continental Army might have lost the battle, but they weren't defeated in spirit, and that resilience would be key as the war dragged on. Today, the Battle of White Plains is remembered as one of those pivotal moments that helped define Washington's leadership style. It wasn't a glorious victory, but it didn't need to be. White Plains proved that Washington was playing the long game, prioritizing the survival of his forces over immediate battlefield success. This approach laid the foundation for his strategy throughout the war, as he would continue to preserve his army and wait for the right moment to strike. More than just a footnote in history, White Plains serves as a reminder that sometimes survival and endurance are victories in themselves. Washington's tactical retreat showed that he understood the stakes, and his willingness to adapt helped shape the legacy of the Continental Army and the resilience that eventually led to victory. Alright, here's the big takeaway from the Battle of White Plains. In the world of 18th century warfare, where honor and victory were everything, Washington chose a different path. He chose survival. He understood that keeping his army together was more valuable than any hill or any tactical win. This battle wasn't about victory in the traditional sense. It was about preserving the heart of the revolution, the soldiers who believed in the cause and the resilience to keep fighting. The Battle of White Plains may not have been a game-changer in terms of battlefield success, but it was a defining moment that showed the Continental Army could take a hit and keep moving forward. It's a story of grit, strategy, and sheer determination, proving that sometimes the real victory is just hanging on and living to fight another day. Washington's decision to retreat wasn't glamorous, but it was a choice that helped keep the revolution alive and ultimately paved the way for America's fight for independence.